Hi there, welcome to Create with Copper. I'm Teresa and today I want to show you how to make your own head pins. Head pins are a jewellery making essential, helping to create movement in your pieces. The advantage of creating your own is that you can make them the size you want, in a wire gauge that will fit through the beads you're using, and by using bare copper you can finish them in the same way as you're finishing the rest of your design. To make the head pins, you need the wire that you're making the head pins out of, a jeweller's torch, tweezers to hold the wire with, a non-flammable surface. I've got a soldering block here and an old wooden worktop, but you could use an old oven tray. A quenching bowl, which just has some plain water in it, and some pickling solution to clean up the head pins afterwards. Obviously you're dealing with flame here, so keep everything flammable out of the way, don't wear loose clothing and tie any long hair back. Now there are two possible ways of holding the torch. You can either hold it so the flame will be horizontal, in which case the wire needs to come in at about a 45-degree angle to the flame. Or you can hold the torch so the flame's vertical and the wire is vertical above it. This is my preferred method as it seems to create a more even ball on the end of the wire. I'd suggest experimenting with both ways of holding the torch to see which suits you best, so I'll show both methods here. Now I'm starting with 1mm gauge wire, which is about the thickest that I use. It balls really well. I've cut 7cm pieces of wire so I can measure them at the end and you can see how much is used up in the balling process. So I'm going to start with the horizontal flame. If I can get the torch lit. We'll then take the wire in at about 45-degree angle. I apologise, I'm reaching around the camera a little bit here. But what you want to do is get the end of the wire just at the tip of the inner blue cone of the flame. That's the hottest part, and you'll notice it beginning to melt. The texture of the wire looks different, it looks glossy, it looks kind of wet. And then the end will kind of leap up and create a ball on the end. Then pop it into your quenching bowl to cool it down, and then into the pickling solution. Now it seems like having a vertical flame should be more awkward, but I actually find it a more comfortable position to hold the torch in. But essentially you're doing the same thing, holding the end to the point of that blue cone, and it will ball quite quickly. There we go. And I could leave it at that if I want an ordinary size ball, but let's just see. You can make that ball on the end a bit larger if you want that for your design. Let's just see how large I can make it. You might find that it goes a little bit askew, but if you keep heating it, generally it tends to straighten itself back up again. You might also find once you've balled the head pins that these balls aren't smooth, they're a little bit pitted. I quite like that look, it looks a bit more artisan and it'll take patina particularly well. But if you want to smooth them off, you can just sand it after they're done. That's quite a large ball on the end there now. So I can quench and pickle that as before. And finally I'm going to make some fine head pins. I've got 0.4mm gauge wire here, and as you can see I've got a couple of prongs. I've just bent it over so I can do two at the same time. I'm using exactly the same technique as before, coming up with the flame from below, but it is really quick, so you do have to be a little bit more vigilant and a bit more careful. Having these fine head pins is really worth it for your small beads and your pearls with very small holes. These do also cool really rapidly, but quench them anyway and pickle as before. And these are the finished head pins. They polished up really well after pickling with just a bit of wire wool, but if you wanted a high shine you could use your other standard polishing methods. The first pin I did with a standard size head now measures 6.6 centimetres, so it only used 4mm in creating that ball. The larger headed pin is now 5.8, so used about 12mm in creating that ball, and the fine head pin only used 7mm. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a guide as to how much wire is being used up. And you can now use them in your jewellery designs.